Hi, welcome to the TwinCities.net user group, May 2026 edition. Today we are happy to welcome back Scott Sauber. Scott Sauber is the head of the .NET user group down in Iowa. He's a Microsoft MVP, a Redgate community ambassador, and an international speaker. So he's also the director of engineering at Lean Techniques in company. Soon to speak at Nebraska Code. Welcome in, Scott. And Scott's going to speak about a very interesting practical AI tooling tips for the too busy developer. I don't know any developers who are too busy, so that'll be just perfect. So, all right, great. Well, how do you want answer? How do you want questions? Do you want people to shout out questions or leave them in the chat? How do you want that, Scott?
Yeah, I'll try and monitor the chat, but like if anybody has a question anytime, feel free to unmute, interrupt me. Like it doesn't bother me. It's not gonna throw me off. I'd rather people like I guess engage versus me just talk at you for the next hour or so. So feel free to if you got anything, I'll try and pause for questions too. Yeah. But yeah, if somebody sees something in the chat, I'll try and keep it monitored. But if I don't see something, somebody can interrupt me in case somebody doesn't want to come off mute or whatever. So yeah.
Sandy. All right, great. Well, without further ado, good luck.
All right, cool.
You can share your screen.
Yep. All right. Yeah, welcome everybody. And as I'm just realizing this, it says there's slides up on my blog and it's not currently. I will upload that after this. So um sorry, I'm moving Zoom out of the way. There we go. So yeah, I will post these slides up on my blog right after this. But today we're going to be talking about just AI tooling tips, and I'll do some like live coding of using AI and show you how I use AI. And if you want to follow me on X or pretty much anywhere, I'm Scott Sauber there. So really, just to kind of level set on who I'm targeting with this talk, because obviously you are taking time out of your day, so I want to make sure that you're in the right room. Just looking for people who are wanting ideas on how to best leverage AI, but like maybe you're too busy shipping value to be paying attention, which I will say if you haven't had your opus moment yet, like if you don't know what I mean by opus moment, then this talk is probably for you because I'm going to show you some cool things using a model called Opus and kind of what it's capable of. I say it's a 100 to 200 level talk. I've learned that maybe this is more like a 100 to 200, 300 level talk. I'm not going to get into like multi-agent stuff necessarily, but we will get into some advanced stuff. And I find a lot of people haven't seen some of the stuff that I'm doing. This isn't just like AI in your IDE. In fact, I don't code. 99% of the code I write, I don't write myself. Claude Code does, and I'll show that in a little bit. And so I'm actually skeptical of are we going to have IDEs in the future? Like is Visual Studio going to go away? Is JetBrains Writer going to go away? Because really I just use those for diffs now. But we'll get into that. But we only have 60 minutes. This is really like an all-day workshop. I'll try and pull out the relevant pieces. So just quick poll. I guess I'll pull up the chat now while I'm thinking about it. Quick poll. What are people using every day? Like how many people are using Copilot? Can we put a thumbs up or me or I am or something like that in the chat? Anybody using Copilot?
Yeah, I'm seeing a bunch of thumbs up coming through my
Okay, cool.
screen.
Cool. What about
Yeah.
Claude Code? Anybody using Claude Code? Okay, so I saw one.
Me,
Cool.
Claude Code, yeah.
Very cool. What about Cursor? Anybody using Cursor? Ah, cool. A bunch of Claude coders. Okay. Codex? Anybody using Codex? I haven't used Codex. Yeah, cool. I haven't used Codex myself, but a lot of people say it's the best tool out there. So I need to give it a try. But any windsurf? Windsurf? Okay. Something else? Anybody using something I didn't call out? All right. Those are pretty much usually the usual suspects. So let's it's kind of what I figured. So the cool thing is a lot of people said they're using something, which is good. I gave a similar talk uh, 5 months ago, and only half the room said that there's probably like 80 people in the room, and only about half the room said that they were using something. So, which made me a little sad. But we're going to talk about all these different things. We're going to talk about, first off, like, am I still going to have a job? I think that's a question people have, and I'll talk about my opinions on that. I'll kind of define a lot of the AI buzzwords like a context, instructions, skills, agents, subagents, all of those things. I'll focus mostly on Copilot and Claude Code. And then I'll show some demos and then kind of give practical tips of where it fits and where it doesn't. So hopefully the idea is you walk away from this and you can start implementing what I'm talking about immediately. But I'll also talk about where I think AI is going in the future, where skills are going in the future, all those kinds of things. We kind of already talked about this. Director of Engineering at Lean Techniques. We're a software consulting company of like 170-ish based in Des Moines, Iowa. So like I just recently got off a gig where I was teaching a team how to use AI tools. Microsoft MVP, Dumb Train author, community ambassador, and I help run the .NET user group in Iowa. So we are remote friendly. So if you're interested in joining that, feel free. All right. So just like first things first, because I feel like people have this like, am I going to be out of a job thing? So I want to kind of like take some time to talk about that for a second. So I want to talk about like a history lesson of like who were the best companies and the best teams like from the 2000s till just before AI and even now. And what set teams apart was ultimately how they were using modern engineering practices and modern work practices, such as automated testing, CI/CD pipelines, all of those kinds of infrastructure as code, all of those things. That allowed them to move very quickly and also with high quality. And they've proven this by something called DORA. So if you go to dora.dev, you can learn more about this. But DORA it stands for DevOps Research Assessment. And basically, they interviewed tens of thousands of teams on what basically sets them apart, as well as like how fast they're moving. And they analyze like how quality their code was and all of those things. And basically, they came down to a set of principles and metrics that determine whether or not a team is high performing, because, number of lines of code generated is not a good metric for are you high performing or not. And they kind of came out with these different practices about like, hey, fast feedback loops are important, working in small batches, having a learning culture, writing automated tests, doing CI/CD pipelines. They don't call it cloud, but they call it flexible infrastructure. But they said that the cloud is flexible infrastructure, database automation, monitoring observability, and all of these things. So I guess you can unmute or drop in the chat. Which one of those things, so I'll show that list again, are valid in an AI dominated world? Does fast feedback still matter?
All,
Do automated tests still matter?
is all of the above an option?
Yes, that is an option and it is the correct answer. So none of these things. So if you're already doing these things today, the good news is the fundamentals don't change with AI. And in fact, I would argue that these things become more important because AI can very quickly go off the rails. Like in this engagement, most recent engagement I had, there are plenty of times where AI went, changed some code and ended up breaking something. But guess what? That never left my machine and actually never left my session because we had thousands of automated tests. And when it broke something, it broke a test. And it was like, without me interacting with it, it ran the test and was like, oh, shoot, I broke something. I need to fix this and make this test pass again. So, and, I didn't even have to get involved. I just kind of saw that it did that and, it just auto corrected itself. So these things become even more important because I would argue that like AI is kind of like a junior developer. And so it needs these guardrails in order to stay on the rails. Otherwise, very quickly, it will start to create, AI slop that we've all heard about if you don't keep things on the rails. So again, the fundamentals remain the same. There's also this idea of Jevons paradox, which this comes from the idea that increasing the efficiency of something actually leads you to using it more, not less. So you might think like, oh, it's going to be even, we're going to build software even faster. Therefore, we're going to build it less. We're going to need less engineers. And Jevons paradox actually says the opposite. So it says that uh, you will actually use it more, not less. So some of these examples is as we got more fuel efficient cars, that meant you were using less fuel on your trips, but that actually led to people having more trips and driving more often, which actually drove more fuel consumption. And you see the same thing with faster internet speed. So it actually leads to more internet usage, not less. Like many of us probably have gigabit internet speeds, and now we're just streaming all the time. Like I just threw away a bunch of DVDs because I'm like, I have a Disney Plus subscription, and I'm gonna have that indefinitely. And I hate having like these hundreds of DVDs that I haven't even cracked open recently. Now I'm gonna regret that when my internet goes out, but I'm taking that trade off. But now we've got these faster internet speeds, and we're using our internet more than we ever did before. So if history repeats itself with Jevons paradox, we're going to become more efficient with creating software, and this will actually result in more software created, not less, which means somebody's got to maintain that. So I'd also challenge it also changes the build versus buy equation. So many times, being in software consulting, I've worked with dozens of companies now, and there's always that question of like, should we buy this off the shelf or should we build it? And a lot of people buy something off the shelf and then customize the crap out of it. And now they're stuck with like the worst of buy it off the shelf and the worst of building it because they've customized it and they can't move off of it. And they didn't want to like change how they did their processes to how the tool worked. And now they kind of have like the worst of both worlds. Well, what if instead, if you could build something 10x, 20x faster, 100x faster, you might just build it versus buy it off the shelf. So instead of, something taking 3 years to make, what if it took 3 weeks or 3 months to make and it got you exactly what it is that you wanted? That's a trade-off you might make. So I think we're already starting to see this among our client base that they're choosing to build more stuff. So the good news is we'll still all have jobs. And just to prove it with data, obviously there's been a downturn in software engineering over the last few years, software jobs. And, there's a bunch of like big name layoffs, like Cloudflare just announced they're laying off a bunch of people today. But if you actually look at the job postings out on Indeed, things are actually starting to trend up year over year. So year over year, things are actually 18% up. Now they aren't back to like the crazy 2020, 2021 days where there's just so much demand, but you can see that this is starting to trend up. And what's cool is you can see there's a big influx that just happened recently. And I think we're going to start to keep seeing these trends go up if Jevons paradox becomes true for this. But right now we're in like a very weird state. But I'm liking what these numbers are showing versus like overall Indeed job postings you can see are trending down across all industries, but across software engineers, it's at least trending back up. So I think that's pretty cool. And just to drive home this build versus buy equation idea even more, Satya Nadella, the Microsoft CEO, said SaaS is dead. So I'm sure some people have seen he said this, which is quite the statement from a guy who has a big line item on his balance sheet that's for Microsoft Office, which is SaaS product. Now, I don't think people are going to make their own like Office 365 and Exchange or anything like that, but I do think they might start building their own CRMs or ERPs or CMSs because those things are even easier to build now with AI. So just kind of wanted to share that. I'm not doom and gloom. I'm actually optimistic about our industry as a whole. And I didn't even mention like there's because people are worried about this, people are getting into this field less from straight out of college. Like people entering in computer science and software engineering across the board is down like 50%. So if demand's going up, but supply is going down of people entering the industry, that to me says good things are for the future for those of us who have been in this industry for a little bit. So kind of the last thing I'll say before we start getting into the nitty gritty details is These tools are the worst they will ever be today. So it looks like a lot of people have started jumping into these tools. So that's cool to see. But if you haven't been or haven't like fully gone in, um, I just want you to think about this. Like these tools are the worst they will ever be today. Like going forward, they will only keep getting better and better. Like new models drop, new tools drop. These tools are just improving over time and releasing new capabilities. Like on a weekly basis, Claude releases a new feature that I end up using later that week. All right, so let's talk AI tools. So I mentioned this earlier. Claude writes about 99% of my code. Now I still review every single line of it. I'm not to that point. There's some people out there who don't review their code. I'm not personally to that point because I've caught some like security things and whatnot, as well as like I especially think early on in a project, if you got a greenfield project, you need to establish the architecture patterns and things like that. That because AI is really good at duplicating those things. So I definitely think you need to be looking at your code. We're not quite to that point yet. I do see a future where maybe we aren't looking at code, but I don't think we're quite here yet. And if you are there, either you need a lot of automation in place to make sure to keep it on the rails, basically, or you're probably risking some low quality code going out there. All right. So AI is an amplifier. So if you've got good practices already, you're going to move faster at a higher quality. But if you have bad practices, you're going to move faster at a lower quality. So it's not going to automatically make your code, good or bad. It's probably going to amplify whatever it is that you're doing today. So, for instance, how do you verify that your app works? Well, good first step is does it compile? Like, does your .NET app compile? I'm pretty sure if your app doesn't compile, it's not going to work. So that's a good first step. But obviously, automated tests are good. I'm a big automated testing proponent. Doing linting and formatting. So .NET, for instance, has .NET format built in the box in the CLI. So you can just run a .NET format and like format your code and also make sure you're following different standards and things like that. So like these are things you should have been doing before AI, but with AI, it helps keep AI on the rails. So you kind of need that judgment to know when AI is going off the rails. And in my opinion, if you don't see like a 10x productivity, like output in terms of like the number of pull requests you're generating, you're probably not leveraging AI as much as you could be, because that's the kind of gains that I've personally seen with myself, which I don't think I was slow before AI. But yeah, the gains are just tremendous. But the question is like, okay, we can generate PRs 10 times as fast, but the problem is somebody's got to review those. And, pre AI, was your team already letting PRs sit for days without reviewing it? Well, that becomes a bigger problem with AI when you're generating 10x the amount of PRs than you were before. But then the other problem is like, do you rubber stamp PRs? Like, it's a 500 line change across 10 different files. And, within 30 seconds of you opening a PR, somebody's already approved it. And it's like, there is no way they even looked at any of that code when they do that. And if you're doing that kind of stuff, you risk stuff getting into your code base that you probably shouldn't have it get in. So that's also another thing with this is like those were poor practices before AI, and it just becomes amplified with AI. So big thing is you still own the code, not AI. You can't say, hey, Claude built this or Codex built this or Copilot built this. Like you are still responsible for the code that gets into your main branch, like period, full stop. You can't blame AI. You're the one, like AI can't get it in there for you. You have to be the one to either like allow AI to like merge your PRs or push directly to main. Like you had to explicitly allow that, or you're the one clicking the button to allow it in. So like you're still responsible at the end of the day. All right. Let's talk like quickly. I'm just going to breeze past this because it seems like a lot of people are using AI tools. LLMs, basically just a massive engine trained on a bunch of text, literally just predicts like basically one word at a time based on probabilities. So if you said, my name is, and then you stopped and you were trained on a bunch of data with my name, you would predict the next word is Scott. And that's essentially what LLMs are doing is they're just predicting what the next word should be. Oftentimes people just say models, but models is a misnomer. Or people will say like, oh, what's the best LLM? And I think saying the best is a misnomer because it's kind of about trade-offs. So you kind of have this like like this pyramid of do you want accuracy, cost, or speed? Pick two of those. Or sometimes you just pick one and you sacrifice the other two. So for instance, I pretty much use exclusively Opus 4.7 because I'm on a essentially a max plan. And I find that's the best model for like one-shotting code, meaning I gave it one prompt, it did exactly what I wanted. But the trade-off is it's the most expensive, but being on a max plan, that doesn't really affect me too much. Although I have maxed out my tokens for the day and week and things like that. But it's also the slowest. But as you go down the list, so the next one down the list is Sonnet. So that's still accurate, less expensive, and it's faster, but it's not as accurate as Opus. And then you get down to Haiku. Haiku responds super quickly, so the speed is very fast, but the accuracy is less, but the cost is also the least too. So like basically there's just trade-offs to these things. If somebody says, oh, this is the best model, that's not really the case. Really, they're just accepting a certain trade-off. Just like if people say, oh, this is the best architecture, this is the best cloud, or this is the best language, or whatever the case is, that's not usually the case. Usually you're just dealing with trade-offs. All right, context. So the idea behind this is the information an LLM considers for a request. So LLMs have a limited context window, so you can't put like the entire internet into an LLM, into a prompt and expect good results. So what makes up context? Your conversation history that you've had, the code that's in your repo, the user prompts, so like what did you type in, the instructions or rules or Claude MD or Agents MD files that are basically kind of your like, here's our standards, here's how we do things. Those also get sent along for the ride in your context, as well as skills. And we'll talk about those in a second. Something I've found that's been key is when you're done with a task, start a new chat, a new session, clear your context, however you do that in your tool. Because I found that's where AI can go off the rails for sure. So there's kind of this idea of with AI, there's the dumb zone and the smart zone. So you may have seen like Opus and Sonnet have like 1 million token context windows. Well, they've done some studies that basically there's like a smart zone where when you're between like 0 to 100,000 tokens, you're in the smart zone and AI largely does what you want if you're using accurate models. But you get from 100K to a million tokens, and that's when you start to enter the dumb zone, and AI starts to can start to tend to go off the rails a little bit. So that's why clearing context is key. And yeah, we'll talk more about that here in a little bit. There's also this idea of compacting, which is basically like summarizing. So when you get large context windows, your agent will start to do compaction, which basically means it's going to take, let's say, like 50,000 tokens, and chop that down into like 1,000 tokens, and it does that by like summarizing what that conversation history was, which is great because you're saving tokens. But the downside is you're summarizing, so some things might get lost in translation because it's basically paraphrasing what happened versus like what actually happened. So that's also something to kind of look out for. And usually, if you're clearing context, you don't have to compact, or the tool is not going to compact for you as often. All right, so some tools. This basically takes an LLM and connects it with your code base. So things like GitHub Copilot. I found in enterprises, this is like Copilot's like the most popular out there. I don't think it's necessarily the best tool, although I think the Copilot CLI is pretty good if you're using that. I do think Claude Code is my personal favorite, and saw a bunch of people who are also using Claude Code. But to give you an idea, like Claude Code is barely a year old. Like it previewed in February of last year, and it GA'd May of last year. So
Crazy.
yeah,
Crazy.
I
It
know.
seems like we've been using it forever.
I know.
Wow.
I know.
Wow.
It's crazy. Well, a year in AI years is like 30 or a year in human years is like 30 AI years. So
Right,
uh,
right.
there is that. But yeah, so like the best tool, at least in my opinion, and I'm guessing other people here are using it too, is only a year old. So like that's how fast this stuff is moving. So what, if I come back and give like an updated version of this talk next year, I might be talking about something that's not even out yet. Cursor, I think probably has the best autocomplete, but I don't really use IDEs anymore, like I said. Codex, full disclosure, I haven't used it, but I have heard nothing but good things. But there's also lots of others, Windsurf, Devon, bunch of others. Again, I said best. That's just my opinions, my experiences. Anybody who tells you they're an expert in all of these tools is flat out lying to you because they are all releasing new features on a, I'm not going to say daily basis, but it's probably like every 2, 3 days they're releasing big features. So, like, there's no way somebody's up to date on what all of these things are unless that's like their full time job. So there's a few different modes. You can go in ask mode. That's kind of like ChatGPT. Just it answers a question. Edit mode. I never use this, but this is like, exactly what needs to change. Don't ever use this mode if you're in Copilot or anything. Plan mode. This I use all the time, and I'll show a demo here in a little bit. And what else I do with plan mode. This kind of formulates your prompt to feed to your agent or edit mode. This just asks you questions to clarify your intent. And I think you should be using plan mode for any medium to large size changes. Now, where the real power is when you get into like agent mode or agentic mode or auto mode. I'll show that in Claude Code. If a number of people are here using Claude Code, if you're not using auto mode, you're missing out. And this is not dangerously skip permissions. This is like a safer version of dangerously skip permissions. I'll show that in a little bit. But this is like, hey, I want you to implement this feature, or hey, my CI is failing. Can you fix that? Or fix these failing tests? Those kinds of things. So those are kind of different modes. Next thing we're going to talk about is instructions. This has a lot of different names like instructions, rules, all those kinds of things. But this is basically a set of markdown files to define your teams or your organization's like standards, basically. So if you're using GitHub or Claude, you can actually have global instructions that like your entire organization follows, and a lot of people don't know that. So this is like, hey, don't use arrange, act, assert comments in my test. Like I personally hate that, and I'll show you. I've got code that by default AI agents sometimes like to write a lot of comments. And I personally don't like it. I'd rather just have like a new line separating those things in tests and just have that be a convention. So I'll show a little bit later about removing that and how do you do that with AI. But like something to think about is anytime the agent does something wrong, like, oh, it used this library, not that, or it used arrange, act, assert comments. I don't like that, or whatever the case is. That should be a tip that you need to go add that to your instructions so that doesn't happen ever again. And I find once you do this for like a week or two, AI is really freaking good and at following these things. Now it doesn't follow it 100% of the time, but it's definitely in the high 90s, at least in my experience, as long as you're not bloating these instructions files. And we'll kind of talk about that here in a second too. But this is a big tip: is if your agent does something wrong, make sure it doesn't do that again by throwing it in your instructions file. So for instance, this is from the .NET Aspire repo. This is like an example of their instructions file. Like it's literally marked down if you haven't seen it. Apply code formatting from this. We prefer file scope namespaces, all of those kinds of things. Here's how you restore the app. Here's how you build the app. And that gives it a way to like auto validate itself once you get going. So just showing you an example if you haven't seen that before. But one thing, I saw some people are floating with different tools. You may have noticed that there's lots of different formats. So every tool now respects an agents.md file in the root. No matter if you're on Copilot or Claude Code or Codex, they all respect that file. But like Cursor has their own with like .cursor rules and .cursor/rules. Claude has their own specific one called claude.md. Gemini has their own. Copilot has their own instructions. And basically what happens is one tool releases this feature like instructions, and they have it like specific to their use case, and then everybody else just copies. And then suddenly they're like, oh, shoot, we probably should have a standard. And then they add a standard afterwards. So it's kind of like this XKCD comment, if you've ever seen this, of like, hey, there's 14 competing standards. And somebody's like, 14, we need to develop one universal standard. And now there's 15 competing standards. It's kind of like that, where a lot of times these standards get backported later on these AI tools, which is kind of unfortunate. It'd be nice if they just standardized from the get-go, but ultimately, that's not typically what happens. All right. Let's talk about skills. How many people are using skills today? Maybe I'll start there. Alex is. Anybody else? I can't see if people are doing emoji reactions. So I've got things minimized, but okay, cool. So if you're not using skills today, this is probably one of the biggest lifts you can possibly have is start using skills. So skills kind of have a few different use cases, and I'll kind of share what those are. So let's say you've got a Blazor app, and you've got a Blazor WebAssembly app, so Blazor front end app, and then you've got a Blazor API or an API that serves data to that Blazor front end app, right? So let's say you've got that in the same repo, and you're using Entity Framework for migrations. Maybe you're using GitHub Actions for pipeline stuff. So you've got some you might have some front end standards, you might have some back end standards, you might have some database standards, you might have some like CI/CD standards, and you could throw those all into like your agents.md file. But the problem is all of that gets loaded every single time you send a message to your AI tool. So it's loading all your front end stuff, all your back end stuff, all of those kinds of things every single time. Well, the problem is like if you're only doing a feature, if you're doing a feature that only touches like the front end, now you're wasting tokens, you're bloating your context. You have a chance. Like there's also in instructions file, they've shown that if you put an instruction at the beginning or the end, those have higher priority than the instructions you put in the middle of the file. So you might actually be losing out on certain things that because you've got too much stuff about like your front end, back end, all of those kinds of things when you might just be making a front end change. So skills allow you to basically load it when it's needed. So this saves context, it saves tokens, it saves money. And basically how it works is you can have like a .github file or .github folder with a skills folder, and then whatever your skill name is, and then say skill.md. And I'll show you an example of this here in a second. Claude's got another format, of course, with .claude, but this is also recognized by Copilot too, but Claude doesn't really play nice with others right now, and so they don't look in the .github folder. But now there's a .agent folder that is kind of the universal standard. But like skills just became a thing in October, so it's still relatively new. Although, as I mentioned, that's probably like 8 AI years ago, just being, 7 months ago or so. There's a bunch of skills out there. Anthropics pushed out a bunch. You can go check that out. But lots of people are pushing skills, and I'll kind of show live demo of you using skills. But for instance, this is like one for front end design. So the idea here is you got a name, so front end design. And then this description is all that gets loaded into context every single time. So it knows, hey, I should invoke this skill when the user asks to build web components or pages or artifacts, whatever the case is. So with skills, you can basically, in the description, you should tell what it is and why to call this skill. And then, then it gets into all of your different things that you can do. Now, skills can also be invoked dynamically. So you can put in things in here that you want to like run, ad hoc. So rather than your agent invoking this as it's needed, you as a user can invoke a skill as well. So maybe I'll do a demo of this, maybe I won't. It's a little bit more of an involved demo, but I've got a skill for reviewing PR comments. So let's say, I've got AI reviewing my code. It leaves some comments. I got a human reviewing my code. They leave some comments. I actually have a skill that basically goes out to GitHub, reviews those comments, pulls them back down, analyzes, are they valid? and then presents a recommendation to me saying, yes, you should address these. No, you shouldn't. And here's why. And here's how to address these. And then I can just say, yes, do all of your suggestions, or yeah, do all your suggestions except number one because of XYZ. And then the skill basically goes and executes all those. And then when it's done, it goes out to GitHub and resolves the PR comments basically as me, and says like, hey, I fixed this in this commit, and it resolves the GitHub thread. So you can kind of start to automate a lot of your workflows with skills. Like another good example, let's say you want to pull down logs from Azure, AWS, or whatever. You can have a skill that just does that for you and says like, hey, grab me the error message. Like I just got this bug report, pull me the error message with this, correlation ID. And then I'm going to go ahead and recommend a fix for me. You can do all sorts of different things like that to optimize your workflow. So skills kind of have like a dual purpose of like this progressive disclosure of when to load it by the agent, but then you as a user can also invoke skills as you see fit as well. So skills kind of trip people up a little bit that way. Okay. Next thing I'm going to talk about, and then we'll start getting into demos here soon, is the Copilot coding agent. So agents can actually run in your browser, not just on your machine. So you can actually assign a task or an issue and watch the progress if you want. You can review the PR. You can also create specialized agents for certain tasks. And agents are specialized agents or subagents are basically just a fancy term for it's a markdown file with some extra context. So for instance, we use feature toggles at a number of our clients, and you can create a feature toggle remover agent. So this is like a very monotonous thing that people do, is removing feature toggles. So you can make an agent specific to removing feature toggles, and you can say, hey, just remove feature toggle ABC123. And then basically in the background, it will go ahead and start doing that work, and then, come back with a pull request basically saying, hey, here's the feature toggle removed. But you can do all sorts of things along that way. However, that feature of assigning an issue in GitHub is not coming to Azure DevOps. So how many people are on Azure DevOps today? Just curious. This usually makes some people sad. Anybody? All
Yeah,
right. Well,
there were a few thumbs up. There were a few
okay.
thumbs up emojis that came through.
Okay. So Microsoft, this is they've publicly said that their long-term strategic investment is in GitHub, not Azure DevOps. I want to emphasize that does not mean Azure DevOps is going away anytime soon. Like Microsoft's like the Windows team is on Azure DevOps, so they're not going to like kill it. But what that means is they're not going to keep doing big investments in Azure DevOps like they are in GitHub. Like if you look at their org structure, there's like 50 or so people who are maintaining Azure DevOps, and GitHub has thousands of employees. So like that just shows you where they're putting the money. So things like the Copilot coding agent, that kind of you can just assign issues and have it work in the background. That feature is not going to come to Azure DevOps. Most likely, I don't have any inside information, but most likely that feature is never going to come to Azure DevOps. So what the GitHub guidance right now is you should be moving to GitHub at least for your repos and your code. You can also obviously move over CI/CD and those kinds of things too. But their recommendation is you should at least be in a hybrid type mode to take advantage of all the latest features coming to GitHub. I saw something in the chat. Okay, cool. All right, so let's I'll come back to this in a little bit and show the coding agent. But we'll do a demo of that here in a little bit. I want to talk about code reviews first. So how many people are using AI for code reviews today? Anybody? Okay. I just expanded it so I can see a little bit more of the plus ones. Cool. A few people. So if you aren't using AI for code reviews, you absolutely should. What I found is it's not perfect. But I find about 80% of the comments are valid in my experience. That does mean 20% of the time you can't just blindly accept whatever it says and just do it. But that's a huge win that 80% of the comments of like, finding maintainability issues, finding better ways of doing things, finding security issues or performance issues, all of those kinds of things. I don't want to say for free because it's definitely not free, but that you can use AI to kind of assist you in these code reviews. But the problem is that's also not coming to Azure DevOps either. So you don't get the Copilot code reviews in Azure DevOps. So again, this is kind of like a freebie that you get with I shouldn't say freebie because it costs action minutes technically as part of your GitHub license now, as of a couple weeks ago. But this is something that you get with a feature that you get with GitHub that you will not be getting with Azure DevOps. Like you'd have to hook up something custom to Azure DevOps. Okay, I'm going to come back to that one too. I want to talk about my workflow here real quick. So, like my big thing is I plan pretty extensively because I want to one shot, which one shot basically means you do it on the first try. So what I found is when people get frustrated with AI, it's because they go back and forth with AI. And, maybe the first time you do it, it gets you halfway there. And then you're like, oh, but change these things. And then that gets you another 50% of the remaining. So now you're at like 75%. And then, you keep going back and forth and you keep getting like a little bit closer, but not quite all the way there. And that's where people get frustrated with AI in my experience. So I usually go in plan mode, and I'll show a demo of this here in a second. So you can one shot. So most plans only take a few minutes to create. And I use a skill called Grill Me. Does anybody use Grill Me? Anybody? Nobody. I see some question marks. I don't see any emojis going up. Okay, perfect. So Grill Me is a skill. I'll go over it here in a second. Cool. Alex said he uses it. Grill Me basically allows AI to not make any assumptions. And if it has any assumptions, it's going to ask you about it and make you answer the question one way or another. So what I found is once I go through Grill Me, I probably one shot things like 90% of the time where, even large features or even like massive refactors. Like I just did a refactor a week ago that probably would have taken me 2 weeks pre AI, and I was done with it in an hour. And it was like touching fundamental parts of the application. And I credit Grill Me with getting me down the right path. And so AI wasn't making assumptions. So if you've used plan mode, Grill Me is like plan mode kind of on steroids. So my workflow, I'm pretty vanilla because what I've found is when I've gotten fancy with Claude Code, it actually makes Claude Code worse. So, Claude Code will fan out and do like things in parallel for you. It'll make those determinations and things like that. But what I found is like when I try and like have it do that or like tell it to do some of those things or have like tons of subagents or things like that, it actually makes things worse. So I stay pretty vanilla and kind of let Claude take the wheel, if you want to say, on how to use it best, because I figure Anthropic's probably smarter than me on how Claude Code works. So I kind of lean on them, but I do add a decent amount of customizations too. Usually I'm running 2 to 4 Claudes at once. And kind of what my workflow is I do plan mode with Grill Me. So I'm going to have emojis. So the person is, I'm still the human in the loop. So this is what the human's doing versus a robot is what the AI is doing. So I go plan mode with Grill Me. And ideally you have like, if you're using Jira or something like that, you've got that hooked up to your AI tool. So you can just point it at a story ID and it's got all of the context there for you. Then I approve the plan and say, yes, I want to do that. And then basically after I approve the plan, AI creates basically a checklist of things that it needs to do. And after it does that, I run Claude in auto mode to loop over the checklist and basically write all of the code. And basically it continues in this loop until I have like a local verify script that passes. So that's, building the app, running the tests, formatting, all of those kinds of things. Then I'm still the human in the loop. I review the code and then I submit the PR using Claude as well. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I've got a custom skill that reviews the PR comments and basically fixes them. And basically, I approve which PR comments we'll address, so I'm still the human in the loop there. And then auto mode to fix those, and then I review the fixes and ultimately, get it approved and merge it. So still a decent amount of human in the loop, but largely a big chunk of the work I delegate to Claude. So, like I mentioned earlier, AI writes 99% of my code. I still review every single line, and I mostly just use an IDE for diffs. Maybe I'll just do like a rename or something like that because it's faster for me to do a rename in the IDE, but largely I only use an IDE for diffs at this point. All right, so let's just do a demo of that because I realize we're starting to get a little low on time. So I've got this application here. It's just a to-do list. It's a Blazor app, so I can type things. I can check it off. I can hit delete. But so I've got this existing application, and let's say I want to add, when I click delete, I want a delete modal to pop up. So I'm going to actually not, so I've got Claude open. So just to show people who haven't done Claude before. So to do Claude, I use the CLI primarily. There is an extension, but I prefer the CLI. And you just type Claude and hit enter. Now the auto mode I'm going to show, you can enable doing -- enable -auto -mode. And basically you do this one time and then you're good to go. And I'll show you what auto mode does. Basically what auto mode does is it doesn't pop up as many like, hey, are you sure you want to allow this for safe things like grepping things in your repo and things like that. So it basically figures out what's safe and basically allows those things without prompting you saying, hey, are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? So I'm going to pop open Claude. So with Claude, you have these slash commands. You can switch what model you want. I'm on Opus. I'm going to stick there. And so let's say I want to add this feature. I'm just going to say add a delete modal to the to-do list. And then I say grill me. So to show you what grill me is, if I go to the skills over here, so you notice it's under Claude, skills, grill me, and then there's a skill.md file. And if I crack this open, this is all grill me is. It's 5 sentences. Is interview me relentlessly about every aspect of this plan until we reach a shared understanding. Walk down every branch of the design tree, resolving dependencies. For each question, provide your recommended answer. So this is also key that it's providing a recommendation. I find probably 90% of the recommendations are valid. Ask the questions one at a time, and if a question can answer by exploring the code base, explore the code base instead. These are like the best 5 sentences you will ever have in your life, trust me. So with Claude, you can shift tab to toggle the different modes. So you can see I've got plan mode, I've got auto mode, and accept edits. I pretty much never use that. So I'm going to shift tab to plan mode, and we can kind of walk through this. Obviously, I'm showing a pretty simple example here, but I've seen this workflow scale to like crazy refactors, like I've said before. So you can see it loaded the skill because if I crack open this grill me file and switch to the description, look at the description, it says you can invoke it when the user wants to stress test a plan, when they want to get grilled on their design, or mentions the phrase grill me, which is what I did. So now it's going to go ahead and fire off and try and figure out like, okay, it's trying to figure out like, okay, I've got some tests here. I can hit Control O and expand like what all is it doing as it's reading my different files. I'm going to go back to a less verbose mode. So you can see now it's already came back and said, hey, what's the scope of this? What does this modal confirm? Do I want to confirm both clear completed, or do I want to just confirm the delete this? I'm going to say per item delete only. So let's just go ahead and answer that with A. I'll probably end up getting between 5 to 7 questions here, and basically whatever I answer, it might lead to more questions. Where does the modal markup live? Should be a new shared component, inline or inside this file, and it recommended A, and that sounds good to me. Let's do a shared component. All right. That was fun. My monitor just went black, but it's back now. I was like, oh, I hit A, and that was not fun. I didn't like that. Okay, so how is the modal rendered? Should I use a native dialogue element? What should I do? I'm just going to go ahead and say A. That sounds good to me. And you can kind of imagine what all this is doing. Where does the pending delete item live? I'm going to go ahead and do A like it recommends. So let's go ahead and do that. Parent owns estate. What should it say? Delete buy milk with subtitle. This action cannot be undone. It recommends A. Generic only. Are you sure you want to delete this to do? Actually, I want something simpler, so I'm not going to do A. I'm going to do B instead. Let's go ahead and all right. Do you want to cancel a delete button or cancel yes and delete or a no yes? My recommendation is labels. Let's go ahead and do that. That sounds good. So basically you can kind of see that like no assumption, like it's going to make almost no assumptions through this whole thing. Now this is like probably a little bit more intense because I don't have a modal in my existing system. If I did, it would just follow what it's doing now. I'm going to go ahead and say A for that. And here, hopefully, I think that's probably the last one or one of the last ones. How should show modal get called? I'm just going to say, just do all of your recommendations from now on, just to move on. And you can see here in a second, basically at the end of this, it's going to come up with a plan for me to basically execute on. So here in a second, as it's thinking, basically that plan is going to end up with like my checklist of things. And usually what happens when I do that is once I have like the checklist, I kind of just let it go afterwards. And then after I let it go, then, I might go spin up another agent that's doing a similar thing. So now you can see it's starting to lock in the rest of the decisions. Here's all the things that I decided, and now it's going to write the plan. So I might spend, depending on the feature size and how many things it can determine from the code. Because if you notice, like grill me, it said, "Hey, go look through the code base and see if it get answered there instead." So if I had a previous dialogue, it would do that. It wouldn't even ask me. And usually I'll spend between 2 to 5 minutes on a plan, depending on how involved it is. But obviously, the more detail you can kind of give up front, the better. And then once it finishes writing the plan, looks like it finished. It's going to show me what the plan is here in a second. So it's saying, hey, I'm going to do all these things. Here are the files I'm going to modify. Here's the tests I'm going to write because I want it to write tests. Here's the different things I'm going to do. And here's how I'm going to verify this by like running a .NET build, running a .NET test, and actually click around. It'll actually click around and do these things too. So I'm going to go yes and use auto mode. So that's probably, I'm curious, how many people are using auto mode in Claude Code? Anybody? Sometimes. This auto mode just came out, I'm going to say a month ago, maybe 6 weeks ago. And I pretty much only exclusively use auto mode anymore. For like when I'm actually having it go execute the code. So you can see it's basically making these checklists of things, and then it's going to kind of execute all of these things. So the nice part is while it's doing this, I can go spin up another agent and start doing things with that as well. So something to also think about is something that we've done is we've actually moved Grill Me upstream into the like product owner seat. So we have a slightly modified Grill Me that basically says, hey, don't ask it any code questions, but it does have access to the code when they're doing this in the Claude.ai portal. And so it can see the code and see what it does, but like basically it'll kind of grill them on different questions that you might have about the story that you're writing. So we found that to be super useful for basically like nobody likes walking into like a refinement session and you have to like go back and forth with people and things like that. So Grill Me kind of like gets all of those questions out of the way. So all right, we're gonna let that run. Claude seems to be running a little bit slower than normal. I'm curious, is Claude having issues? Nope, nope. All systems operational. Cool. Might just be my machine with share my screen. So we'll let that keep running and I'll proceed and then we'll see how Claude does. Um, so I did want to talk a little bit about where I think things are going. I'm curious, does anybody use something like Conductor or how many people are spinning up multiple agents using like Claude Desktop and things like that? Anybody? Using Squad from Brady Gaster? Cool. Yes. That's been my experience too. So yeah, the comment was I'm using Squad from Brady Gaster, but it eats tokens. So Squad kind of spins up like a team of agents to work together. That's been kind of my experience when I've used Squad or similar. There's a bunch of other tools out there or similar tools out there. Is uh, I don't know that sub agents actually help me a ton. I found when I go with this workflow, like it can delegate things to agents and things like that as it needs. Like, for instance, when you're in plan mode, it might send, didn't do it that time, but it might send, like, hey, go look in this part of the code base for what we're doing over here. Like, go look in the front end for what we're doing and go look in the back end for what we're doing. So I just find that, like, when I try and do those things, it just ends up eating tokens. And I just don't have better results, really. Yep. If I so the question was, does Visual Studio have any way to do multi-agent? That's a good question. I actually don't use Visual Studio. I'm on a Mac right now. So I pretty much use Writer or VS Code. Um, I don't actually know for Visual Studio. I would guess if they do, it's probably through their Copilot extension. My experience, I've put in plan in place to run multiple sciences unit work at the same time. Yep. You can definitely do that if you've got isolated things. Yep, Codex also has multiple agents. Yep, for sure. I'm curious how this is doing. Okay, so it's about a third of the way through. So if you haven't seen Claude Code, you can see like it's showing you the code as it's going. And you can follow this. Usually I'm not following this super close. I just look at the end result because sometimes it'll do something and realize it's wrong and then fix itself. I'm curious if it does that here, like if it doesn't compile or things like that once it gets to near the bottom. But there's different apps for managing multiple things. So like, for instance, if I go to conductor.build, Conductor it's a free open source tool. And basically the idea here is you have multiple workspaces, so multiple sessions running at once. And then, this is kind of your chat window. And so you can use Conductor with Claude Code. You can use it with Codex. You can use it with Copilot CLI, whatever. And you connect it down here. And then basically you can pop into the different sessions. You can look at diffs, but then it also has like GitHub integration where there's like, hey, what's this? Where's your PR? And has it been merged or not? So it kind of gives you like a very lightweight, like agentic first IDE experience. GitHub is coming out. They just announced on Twitter recently that they're coming out with something very similar to this. I don't know when it's going to get released. They haven't released it yet, to my knowledge. My guess is they'll probably release it at Microsoft Build because Microsoft likes doing conference-driven development where they like releasing splashy things at conferences. So my guess is Microsoft Build, which is in about a month. It's in the first week of June. Something like this for GitHub is going to come out. But this is technically an open source tool. You can do this, and basically you create multiple sessions going at once, and you can kind of monitor those things. So I definitely think that's kind of the future. I do think the bottleneck is moving from writing code to reviewing code. Because literally the best devs I know today spend like 80-90% of their day actually reviewing code, not writing it. Which you could make the argument that was a lot of what seniors did as well, depending on the company you're at. Um, but literally reviewing code is the new bottleneck. I do think the context window is also expanding. So think about, I'll talk about this here in a second, but like connecting all the different pieces of your SDLC. So like connecting Claude Code to Jira, so you could just like pull in Jira, connecting Claude Code to GitHub, so you can like pull in the context of GitHub. Like for instance, I've connected it to GitHub in a read-only state, so it can't, do a bunch of things and delete repos or anything like that. But I've asked it, hey, go look at this repo and because I need to integrate with this API and go figure out why I'm getting this 500. I've done stuff like that, for instance. So like the context window is just expanding, and the more context you give it, the better results you're going to get. And I think that's going to become even more of the case. Like people are already starting to do things like have AI look at your error logs and basically, you've got your exceptions, you've got your stack trace, you know exactly what line number, what file. So you could have it like auto submit PRs for you. And you're starting to see even things like, hey, this application has a memory leak. Let's go ahead and take a memory dump, feed that through AI with the code base, and then analyze where that memory leak is coming from. Which, if you've never dealt with a memory leak before, can be a very painful process to try and identify that. And literally, AI can figure it out in like 10 minutes. It's crazy. All right. Let's see. Are we done yet? Cool. So it looks like it's done. All the tests pass. It's kind of sad. I wish the test didn't pass initially and you saw it like fixing itself, but you can see it says the build's green. And here's what it did. So let's go ahead because I've got hot reload on. I don't actually trust hot reload. I don't know about you all. But I'm going to go ahead and pull this up. And so now I'm going to say twincities.net user group. Oh no, it's failing. Of course, AI is dealing with some issues. So let's fix this. Let's have AI fix this issue. So I'm just going to go ahead and feed this in. That is the first time when I saw I was going to do JavaScript. I'm like, you shouldn't need to do JavaScript for this, but I decided to let it do its thing, and apparently I was wrong. I'm getting an error. Here's the error. Fix it. Probably didn't need to put all that in there. Maybe I'll just say if you can do this without JavaScript. I'll say fix this dialog to not use JavaScript. Maybe I'll say that. And we'll see what it does because we still got a little bit of the presentation left. So that's the fun part of AI demos is they're non-deterministic. And that was the first time when I've given that demo that it's actually failed. So that's fun. But the problem is I didn't give AI a way to validate itself with the browser. So if you notice, if I go back, it says, hey, I tried to validate this, but I can't. So I'm just going to go ahead and do a .NET run. So what I probably should have had it do is create like an end-to-end playwright test. And basically it would have validated itself. So this is a good example of you should give AI a way to validate itself so the fundamentals don't change. I always tell people start with plan mode by default and graduate out of it when you feel comfortable. So don't like just jump into the implementation. Start with plan mode. The auto mode I showed that with -- enable -auto -mode. That's also a good tip. You should be using skills if you're not already. You should also use CLIs over MCP servers. So if you're using an MCP server today to connect to like GitHub or Atlassian or Azure, you're probably burning up more tokens than you need to. You could just like install the GitHub CLI or the Azure CLI and authenticate and then give Claude access to that so it can pull data from those systems. Also, be aggressive clearing context. So I haven't done it yet, but if you do a /clear, that will clear your context. So you start kind of fresh. And then tighten your feedback loop, both local and CI. And then when you're done, you should tighten it again. You should use /insights So I didn't show this, but if I go back and let's just spin up another Claude window, you can do a slash insights. And then basically what that will do is Claude will analyze how you're using Claude and give you some suggestions. So we'll look at that here in a second. You can also have it do a slash review or slash security review. So that is baked into Claude as well. So if you do slash review, you can review a pull request or slash security review. So you can do both of those things. Also keep your agents MD lean. So just have cross-cutting things in there like, hey, always write tests. Here's how to run the app. Here's how to build the app. Here's how to verify it. Don't put your code structure in there because the AI is already really good at figuring out code structure, and try and delegate to skills as much as possible. But then also keep an eye on AI. So don't just like blindly have AI go do things. You actually need to like keep an eye on what it's doing, because sometimes it might get stuck. So I'll give an example. I was helping out somebody doing React, and they copy and pasted an error message, and basically after 15 minutes, Claude was still trying to do stuff. So she called me over, and Claude was actually reading the node modules folder because in the error message there's a node modules reference, and basically it just got stuck doing that. And if you've ever done node modules, there's like millions of files in there. So we just took the error message, copy and pasted it without that reference, and pasted it in, and within 30 seconds she had her answer. So you kind of need to watch what AI is doing and understand if it's going off the rails, but also just try things and see what happens. So let's see where we're at with this. So cool. I've got my file on how I should use Claude Code Insights. So you can see like, hey, here's what's working. Here's what's hindering you. Here's some quick wins to try.
This way, this side.
Yep. Go for it. Chris, do you have a question? Okay. I'm gonna keep going. But then it'll kind of give you ideas on, hey, here's some things to do. So you can copy this into your Claude MD file, for instance. But a lot of times I'll just tell Claude, hey, go analyze this usage report and recommend different things to me. So let's see how this is doing. Okay, so now it all passes. So let's see, magic, if this is now working. I don't have an error message, so that sounds good. So now if I click this, hey, I've got a delete modal. So I can go ahead and delete it, and yay, it deletes. Versus, let's say if I cancel this, it does not delete. So cool. So that's a good example of, I saw something where it said, hey, I'm going to use JavaScript. And in my head, I was like, I don't know that I need to use JavaScript here. So again, AI is not perfect. And this is also why I'm like still reviewing the code and all of those kinds of things, still have the human in the loop. So good news, it's not perfect. We have jobs, as proven by that right there. But how do I stay up to date? Honestly, what I do is follow people on Twitter and LinkedIn. So Boris Cherney, who created Claude Code, he's a great follow. Lee Robinson, who's at Cursor now, he's a great follow, even though I don't use Cursor. He's got a lot of good tips. The at Code for VS Code, Claude AI, Claude Devs. This is a pretty recent account that just got released in the last few weeks, but it's already got like 100,000 plus subscribers. Corey House is also a good follow. He's got a lot of AI tips. So honestly, Twitter is how I keep up to date on what's going on. But the impact of this that I've seen at clients, so like I said, I just got done with like a 7-week engagement at a client where 4 of us, basically 2 of us that were pretty familiar with AI tools and 2 people who are not, built an app from scratch and shipped close to 100,000 lines of code in those 7 weeks. And we actually did it 99% with Claude, and we had Copilot do an assessment of it afterwards and just said, hey, analyze this code base and give it scores, and basically gave it a 9 out of 10, and every score like performance, maintainability, all those things were between an 8.5 and a 9.5. So we weren't just shipping slop, like we were actually reviewing all those lines of code and things like that. So they felt like they were at least 2 times as fast with double the quality too. But they also said, I feel like this also makes me 10 times faster. Basically, that first one was what they told their bosses because they didn't want to get their bosses super excited. And this is the one that they actually felt. And one of the devs actually posted this on LinkedIn about a week ago after we were done with them, and basically he just said he's never been more excited, essentially, because of all the things that we're doing with Claude, and he's learning to write better prompts and all of those kinds of things, and knowing when to lean on AI and when not to. So this is real stuff, shipping like production apps and things like that, and you can do go super far with AI. So some takeaways. I just want to give you some ideas on where AI is today, kind of where it's going. Ideas you can literally start using today, like auto mode if you're already using Claude Code or Grill Me or those kinds of things. If you feel like, oh, Grill Me is going to ask me a bunch of questions, in my experience, it leads to a better outcome at the end of the day. And if you haven't jumped in, I think you definitely need to just start jumping in because the productivity gains are real. And I really like this quote that change has never been this fast, but will never be this slow again. So some resources. It's currently not up on my blog, but I'll have this slide deck up on my blog here, like right after this, within 5 minutes. So that. Any questions anybody has? If you want to follow me on socials, there's stuff there. So yeah, go for it.
Any questions, people? Go ahead and unmute or type it into chat.
Hey, yeah, it's a very, very interesting slide deck here. I'm a retired software engineer, just retired last year. And of course, all of this is happening as I'm walking out the door. But it seems to me that the biggest risk of all of this is potentially, I think, probably engineers could get lazy and just hit submit and walk away. You know, take your 100%. Hand off the auto drive car, something like that. So yeah.
100%. So yeah, so like I said, I mean, I showed that kind of workflow. Like the human was in the loop in 40% of the steps. So I definitely still like keeping the human in the loop. There is a tendency though to just let Claude take the wheel. And you saw, I didn't intentionally do that, but Claude messed up. So it's definitely not perfect. I do think that is a self-correcting problem in a way, because if you start shipping slop and you start causing, like if I had shipped that without even testing it locally, obviously it wouldn't have worked and it would have broken the app. So like you do kind of get a self-correcting feedback loop there, because if you're always shipping slop that's not working, then you're probably going to get in trouble with your manager or teammates, whatever the case is. So I do think that loop is a little self-correcting, but for sure there is that concern. I think that was actually a good example of, I didn't have enough automation to keep AI on the rails. I didn't have that end-to-end test. And yeah, if you don't have the right automation levels, it will not keep AI on the rails without a lot of work. So
the other thing I was thinking is, I guess it would be possible for the code to be beyond your experience. And so it could generate code that you really don't understand. And that would be a problem also.
Yeah. Yep. That's totally a legit concern. I tell people, like I just did an internal workshop for our team on Monday on AI tools. And we have somebody who's got like 2 years of experience. And he asked, people getting into the industry, what should I do about it, basically? And like, how should I, what if Claude's doing things I don't understand? And my answer to him was, well, you need to understand it. Like if you have a question of the code it's generating, guess what? You got Claude right there. Just ask it what it does. Like,
tell me like research. I'm a high school student. Yeah. Right.
Yep. Yeah. So, I think that's the big thing is like, you are, to go back to what I said earlier, you're still responsible for the code you're shipping. And if you don't understand it, that's a problem. Like it was a problem before. Like we had this problem already with like Stack Overflow, where people would copy paste code and like it'd work and we'd be like, oh, okay. And if they didn't understand it, but their code worked, then they just, they had the tendency to ship it. But I think you need the discipline to like say like, okay, what is this code actually doing? Why does it work? All of that kind of stuff. And good news is you've got a tool right at your fingertips that can help you with that and tell you how it works.
My final question is documentation irrelevant at this point? I mean,
it's a great question. I just had this conversation with that most recent client. I don't think it's irrelevant. I think you can, but I do think you can ask like GitHub has a feature built into GitHub where you have like a chat GPT experience with your GitHub repo or your org, depending on how you set it up or how you search it. And you can ask questions about your architecture. You can ask questions about your code bases, all of those kinds of things. And in my opinion, if you can do that, you don't need as much documentation as you had before. Like I think generating like high level architecture diagrams and boxes and arrows is still useful. And what's nice is you can actually use AI to do that. So you can say like, hey, review the documentation that we have like in your your agentsmd file. You can just say, by the way, sorry if anybody likes regions. I don't like regions. So I said don't use regions ever. You can say like, hey, review the documentation in /docs and make sure it's always up to date.
Okay.
You could do something like that and have AI keep it up to date. Like again, it's not perfect. Just because it's in here doesn't mean it's going to run 100% of the time, but I find it runs 90+% of the time.
Cool.
You can also like not put it in here and have something more deterministic that always does that too. Yeah. So, okay.
I have a question.
Yeah, go
So,
for it.
so you mentioned like the productivity became like 10 times or two times or whatever, right? But
Yep.
do you have any like, is that more the code like you are newly adding? Like I can see like right like in your demo, like you're creating new functionality. That's
Yep.
pretty. Do you have any experience about like using AI to refactor like entire legacy old code?
Yep. Yes. So what I would say for that is the fundamentals don't change. So there's a book called Working Effectively with Legacy Code by Michael Feathers. And basically his argument in that book is before you touch legacy code, if you have the time, which now with AI, we have more time than ever, you should first write some automated tests around the code before you touch anything, basically. And the nice part is AI can generate tests very, very quickly. And so I think the fundamentals don't change of like if you have legacy code that you're going to touch, ideally wrap some automated tests around that and wrap some automation around it first before you touch it. So that way you have more confidence basically that you're not breaking things. So that's probably the approach that I would take in those situations.
Okay.
I've actually found that brownfield applications are easier for AI than greenfield applications. And what I mean by that is in those 7 weeks, the first week and a half of doing pure AI was pretty painful because there weren't any patterns established in the code base or anything like that. So there's a lot of times where we just like slapped AI and we're like, nope, don't do that. Don't do this. Add this to my agentsmd. Do this instead. And we're reviewing all the code. But once we establish the patterns, AI is really good at following patterns. So if in your existing application you have patterns that you like, which hopefully you do, you can say, hey, AI, go look at the pattern that's over here in this code base. Don't look at what's over here, basically. So like I find greenfield is actually a little bit harder because you haven't established what your patterns are. But once you lay that foundation down, and like I said, we were aggressive about if it did something we didn't want, we put it in our agentsmd, hey, don't do it. So our agentsmd had like, I don't know, probably 50 different things in it, and 45 of them, I bet, were don't do this thing. So yeah, that's kind of, I guess, how I would approach things.
Okay. Yeah. I've been not really being really successful about making a big change. I can use for small change or write a small method or something like that, but not trying to because I can't just explain what I don't understand functionality base, So that's the challenge I guess I'm having. But
yeah, I would say, yeah, if you can wrap it in tests first, I think that's going to help you. But like if you can give AI the like small steps to take with like plan mode and grill me, I find that helps too. Because it's just like people, like if you give people a big task, they're more likely to mess it up. But if you give them lots of little small tasks, they're usually better at doing those. But also the model and tool chain that you're using. So Opus and Claude Code for me is by far the highest success that I've had. So,
but I never use a Claude Code, but is it something we can do with like what you showed is something we can do with like Visual Studio? It's called Copilot or
Yeah, so Copilot has a Copilot CLI.
okay,
I would say I've
like
used
the
it.
grill me stuff is also there too. I never
Yep.
really use. Okay.
Yeah, those skills are universal across, like that's a universal concept across all AI tools like Copilot, Claude Code, all of those kinds of things. So you can use that in there. You can use the Copilot extension in Visual Studio too. I just have had worse luck with that than like the Copilot CLI personally.
Mm.
But like you can still get, at least some similar experience using the extensions and things like that. I would say my experience or from talking to people, like I said, I'm on a Mac, so I don't use Visual Studio, but my experience talking to people is Visual Studio is behind VS Code from like a Copilot
Yeah.
integration perspective. So if you're having bad luck with Visual Studio, maybe try VS Code and see how that goes. Like
Oh,
just try
the
a few things.
Copilot CLI better.
I was talking about the Copilot extension. The CLI you can use in any tool, like as long as
Okay.
you have a terminal, you can use it. But um, yeah, uh, basically it's the exact same thing I showed with like you just start a new session and you just say Copilot instead of Claude, and then you pretty much get a similar experience to what I showed.
Mm.
But yep.
Thank you for showing. That was cool.
I have a quick goofy question,
Yeah, go
Scott.
for it.
One of the things that I find that I have that I feel like I have to iterate with Claude Code. I use Visual Studio Code with the Claude Code extension.
Extension. Yep.
But but I have actually pointed it and said, look at this particular given like images and said, look at the styles, look at how, the font, the um, colors, and how this visually looks. And I have had it create something that is totally, I'm like, how in the world? So do you have anything that you use for like the front end stuff like any kind of extra other than maybe like
Y-
front end skills or something tips?
Yeah. I would
Or
say
does that normal?
the front end skills, like William, I think you dropped a link to some in the chat. Yeah, the
I
front
just
end skills is one way of
I'll put
combating
the
that.
link
Go for
in,
it.
but I just mentioned it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so that helps. I would say if you have like a mock-up, you can also like paste that into the extension or the CLI too. And
Okay.
it doesn't do pixel perfect, but I'd say it gets you like 95+% of the way there.
Okay.
I would also I'd also look, are you using Opus as a model or using Sonnet or
Yeah.
Haiku?
Yeah, but my company just switched to like enterprise, blah blah blah, and it's like they're paying by tokens, and so I'm trying to like
Oh,
not
conserve tokens. Yep.
use as many tokens. So when I have to loop through, it's kind of annoying sometimes when I'm like, okay, this is visually what I want it to look like, and then it gives me some crazy because my company's colors are purple, so that's like woo, so that can get a little nutty looking. But anyway, so
Yeah.
On that,
Yeah. Go for it.
on that, Adine, when things go sideways like that, check out what your context is, because sometimes,
okay, that's a good point.
yeah, once it gets over a certain limit, especially if you're just grinding away at getting something to work, you
Yep.
bump into those limits and then it starts hallucinating. So
Yep.
I clear context or just start a new chat sometimes too.
See, I'm
Yeah.
not
So
as oh, go ahead. Sorry. Yeah, I'm not as good at doing that, so that's a good tip. Thank you.
yeah, for sure. That's one of the biggest things I've seen. I think is one of my tips or something like the
Mm-hmm.
clearing context is huge. Honestly, like when I had that bug, I should have
Mm-hmm.
cleared my context there because what I did
Okay.
previously is not like it's relevant, but not really relevant because at the end of the day, it matters what the code is now, and I can go figure out what the code
That's
is.
a
So
good
really, I
point.
should have done a slash clear and then pasted in that error message that I had.
Okay. And that'll save the tokens probably too, right?
Correct. Because you're not
Okay.
sending basically your entire conversation history along for the ride or
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Another tip I didn't mention, and this is kind of like crazy, but Anthropic has like I can't remember her exact title, but it's like a chief psychiatrist on staff. And basically they've already deduced that Claude has basically what they're dubbing anxiety. So if you start yelling at Claude, they've proven that that makes it do worse because suddenly it gets into like trying to please you more. And it's like trained by everything that's on the internet. So the problem is the internet's super negative, as we all know. And so there's tons of posts and things like that out there of people like ripping AI and how stupid it is and how stupid Claude is and all these things. So like Claude is aware of all that and like wants to please you basically. And when you start yelling at it, it knows you're mad and it like basically makes somebody super anxious and then like makes them like pause and like double check themselves, triple check themselves when they really shouldn't because they've verified themselves in other ways. So like they've proven that if you yell at Claude, you're gonna get worse results. So maybe throw a thank you at times. Burn a couple tokens. Do it clear and just say thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, I also heard not to be.
That's amazing.
I also heard don't say please and thank you because you're wasting tokens and it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
It's just energy and water. We've got more of it. It's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. But hopefully they remember it when Skynet happens. That I was polite.
Yeah, every time I see all this, I go, we're near the end of civilization. That's all I can explain.
Oh no.
Unbelievable.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Earl, I do not receive what you are saying.
Yeah. I never thought I'd see this in my career that I would be generating code. You know.
Yeah.
It is amazing.
It is crazy. And yeah, like I said, it's only going to get better is the crazier part. Like it's already really good. I think the future is we're going to be running models locally and not like as hardware keeps getting better and as the models keep getting more efficient. I don't think we're going to be shipping all this basically because it's interacting with Claude APIs here and models that are hosted by them. I think long term we're going to have these models local in the next 3 to 5 years because I think the models keep getting better and the hardware will keep getting better and it'll actually make like if I had Opus 4.7 locally in like 3 years, like I can pretty much build whatever I want with Opus 4.7 today. So even 4.5, Opus 4.5, I could have built anything that I wanted. So
I'm running LM Studio locally and the Gemma 4 stuff. All those open source models right now are about 2 years behind what the current stuff is. They're very good, but I don't think they can keep up right now. But yeah, very soon.
It'll be interesting to see how it all shakes out.
I heard someone say that they could envision that AI would become the operating system. We would not have, it would be integrated into all of our operating systems or something like that. I thought that was a pretty cool idea too. It's all changing so fast, you know, it's hard to say.
But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how things shake out. Cool. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. I've been frustrated with my AI interactions. Maybe I'm like the naysayer in the room. Like I get 80% crap and 20% good. I'm not using skills yet. Is it perhaps the quality of my prompts or some other? Like I'm not rude to the AI or like I don't think I'm in the anxiety zone here. But is there something I could do to increase my productivity, or maybe there's something I'm not doing that could be
do you use
win?
So a few things come to mind, like William mentioned, like clearing contexts, making sure you're doing that regularly. Outside plan mode too is also big. Like I pretty much never do a moderately sized feature without plan mode just to make sure it's stays on the rails. So I don't know if you're using plan mode at all, but I would say that would be another big thing.
No, the challenges that I found is like the subtly wrong stuff where it's exactly what you're saying. You have to understand what you're looking at, but then it seems like through 4 iterations of trying to tune AI, I could have wrote it myself kind of a thing.
Yep. And that's, I mean, I guess I two-shotted my example, but I find I one-shot quite a bit if I do a good plan mode. And I mentioned like I saw it said JavaScript and I just like let it go because for the demo, but I probably would have like if I was maintaining that code, I would have said like, hey, don't do JavaScript. I want to stay in C#. And that would have fixed my problem actually. But I would say if you can give it a way to verify itself, like have it write tests, that will also slow things down, slow it down and like make it verify itself. Like the self-verification thing is probably one of the bigger things that you can do. Because whenever AI has like a goal in mind, like I have to make this end-to-end test or this automated test pass, yeah, I just find it does a really good job staying on the rails.
Thank
If you want,
you.
we can
I
pair sometime.
appreciate that.
Yeah. If you want, I can hop on a call and we can pair sometime. But let me know. If it's not obvious, I like talking about this stuff. So
Any other questions for Scott? Comments? I'm going to stop the recording. If not, at least I'm going to try to stop the recording. Going once. All right.